So I was thinking about why is it that when humans, just going to call us humans, go through hard times, have challenge or suffering or pain or loss or grief or just life gets tough, why do we, not all, but why do a lot of people lose faith in life, lose faith in any kind of hope that there is something good, lose faith in universe or God or source or love? Or what is it that makes humans lose any kind of sense of goodness or even magic in life when things get hard? Because really, when things get hard and they're challenging or they're painful or they're scary, that's almost the time when we need most to have some kind of belief or faith or trust or knowing or wisdom that, like, this is a part of life and we'll get through it. So I want to talk about what happens within us where life can get really dark if things get challenging. Rather, things can be challenging and there's still light in the day, if you know what I mean. So I'm curious to talk about this subject because there's a lot of contrast in the world, right? There's a lot of things that are terrible and scary and unpredictable and chaotic, and it's really easy for our spirits to be brought down. And actually, those are the moments where it's so vitally important to stay in heart, to stay in the essence and frequency of love. And I'm seeing this play out not only on a collective level, but with certain individuals that might be going through struggle in their lives. And I want to talk about how can we hold on to even just like the sliver, even just like the thread that holds the balloon that keeps us from drowning within our own despair. So let's dive in. This is Corinne Bloom, and you're listening to Raw Conversations. So there's, as always, I'm like, where do I begin with this? Where do I begin? I think firstly, there's just a lot of conditioning or indoctrination or whatever it is to believe, to have these belief systems that tell us that if you're not okay, that something is wrong with you. If you have an emotion that is other than happiness and positivity and productivity and success and energy and extroversion and all of these things, that something is wrong with you. And our society is kind of like wants to live in one season, right? It wants to live in forever summer because it doesn't like the season of winter, the metaphor of death. You know, a culture that is afraid of death doesn't actually know how to live. If you don't know how to go through winter, you won't have the stamina to just stay in forever summer, right? I'm using this as metaphor, obviously. So when you have a culture that's like, it's only okay to be one way, and a lot of the rest of your humanity and your emotions and your feelings and even your thoughts are things that you keep hidden, are things that you keep suppressed, are things you don't talk about, are things you certainly don't accept or let alone embrace, right? This is why many humans are walking around feeling less than whole, feeling fragmented, because that's what's happening, is that there's this severing from ourselves, severing from true nature, severing from the natural cycles of life and existence, of being human, of nature itself. And so when you have that and you have judgment, then it makes sense that if a person is having a hard day, or if a person is having a hard phase of life, or if a person is going through something that might be really difficult and challenging or painful or scary or traumatizing, whatever, which I'm sure plenty of people have throughout history, but in these past years, it's been a lot. It's been very intense, right? It's only natural that they'll go to, well, something is wrong. What have I done wrong? I mean, you've got a lot of kind of indoctrination that comes in from various angles as well. But there is this overriding kind of, what have I done wrong? Why am I being punished? And, God is bad, or the universe is bad, or the universe doesn't exist, or, this, as I was talking about in the beginning, this loss of faith, this loss of knowing, this loss of feeling supported. And I wonder if we didn't have that same kind of judgment because we've kind of exiled parts of ourselves for so long that we're so unfamiliar and we're so uncomfortable and we so don't know how to be with the hard emotions, right? I even think it's kind of funny to say hard emotions because the thing is they're just emotions. And I wonder, would they be that hard if it was something that we had been taught, learned, supported in by the village, by the community, by the society, that all of these feelings are okay. So would sadness be so hard? Would grief be so hard? Would pain be so hard if it was included as part of your humanity as something that was absolutely okay, that there was nothing wrong? I wonder, right? I can only say from my experience that I experience less, I'm going to call it unnecessary suffering, because I include all my emotions. It doesn't mean that I don't suffer at times, because yes, sometimes certain emotions feel rather intense, right? They feel intense. Like sometimes you have a day where you feel down, or you feel lonely, or you feel lost, or you feel confused, and your heart might actually ache, or you might be going through a phase of your life where you're like, what the hell am I doing? And I don't have what I want in my life, and I can't get there, and it's not working out, and what's the point, and what's the meaning? And your soul might ache, right? And that hurts. There is suffering in that. Like there just is. But the unnecessary suffering that I've spoken to a lot about is when we go, and therefore that is bad, or I've done something wrong, or I've messed up in life, and we reprimand ourselves, or we reprimand life or universe or God or even people in our lives, right? And I think when we go into this kind of dark hole where we lose faith in things and we question things, then what's happening is I think we go more into the reptilian part of our brain where we're just in fight or flight or freeze. We're going into like an instinct of survival. And then we're going into fear. And when we're in fear, it's easier to judge, and it's easier to blame and point the finger at someone else, at something else. And I've experienced this myself when it's like, I've always had a very strong relationship, you could say, with the universe or source or God, whatever your name is for it. But there have been many times where I'm like, fuck you. Where are you? I don't feel held or supported. And so I know that I've been in that place, and it's very interesting for me to observe when I can see other people are going through that, or when, I hear or I read on social media of, so many people that are really struggling with their well-being, or even worse, taking their lives, or all of this because life is hard. Or there's that feeling of being defeated, or is that feeling of when we don't believe in anything anymore. And my sense is that we lose belief when we feel like we're not being held and supported. And the thing is I heard this somewhere, I forget where I heard this, and actually I had a friend that I've had so many synchronicities in these days. Once you start paying attention to synchronicities, it's like laughable. It's insane. But basically it was this, no matter whether you believe or you don't believe, that magic, that essence, that is whatever you want to call it, God, source, universe, love, consciousness, is there, will always be there, can never not be there. Because also we are it, right? But we live in a dualistic realm, and so we see ourselves as separate. And so, yeah, we can feel like it can either be there or not be there, and that it's something separate to us. But actually, I love this, like it's there no matter if you believe in it or not. And so when we go into the hard and challenging time, when we feel the pain or the suffering or the fear, what would allow us to hold on to that thread, as I said in the beginning? Some people can go through hard times and they're like, I've got faith. Like they've got it. They're solid, But sometimes there are people that just completely like go into the void. And there is a gift in that as well. But they go into the void, you could say. And so like, what is the thread that can hold us just above kind of our chin falling beneath the water and drowning in our own despair? And I think it's practicing on a daily basis, especially when you're feeling good, this knowing, because a lot comes down to belief, but this knowing of, I am always held. You are always held. We are always held. We just are. Now, our human self might go, well, when I was a baby, I was left in the crib to cry, or, I wasn't paid attention to, or I wasn't loved, or I was abandoned. One of my parents abandoned me, or I felt rejected, or I didn't feel good. That's the whole human story. That's the arc of the wound. That's the arc of forgetting who we are so that we can remember ourselves again. But from a soul level, and I am going to speak in these terms because I think it's helpful if you're walking a spiritual path. If you're not walking a spiritual path, none of this might be interesting. You might have tuned out already. But if you followed me by now, you know that this is my perspective. And there's no one right way or one way. But if you're walking a spiritual path and you believe that there's more than just this flesh suit, this, avatar that we are, then from the higher perspective, we are always, always held. We also can never die, right? So sometimes I think at the core of rejection, at the core of loneliness, at the core of abandonment is the fear of non-existence, is the fear of death and non-existence. And I remember listening to Darius Wright, who, has this whole method around controlled out-of-body experiences. And he's like, once you can step out of your body and you recognize who you are as a soul, as an infinite being, you can no longer really be afraid of life because you recognize that there is no death. You realize there is no death, right? But again, a culture that doesn't embrace and include death as part of life, we're going to be afraid of what we don't know. And so whatever we exile and we push away and we say, no, let's not talk about that, we get scared of it because we don't know it, because we don't have a relationship to it, right? This is also tying into, we don't care when we don't know, right? And goodness, the world is so kind of, you could say, so easily in war with one another, because when you have this illusion of, this feeling of separation, or this illusion of, I can't be touched because so much happens through the internet, right? Then it's easy not to care. But it's so important to care, right? It's so important to remember that we are innately compassionate, kind, loving human beings. That's the essence of who we are. But life happens, and when we go into that reptilian part of our mind, our brain, and we go into fear, then we go into judgment, we go into separation, we go into blame, right? So there's the pattern. It's an interesting one when people are going through pain and fear, how it's easier for them to point the finger at someone else than to be in the vulnerability of their own pain, to be in the vulnerability of their fear. And again, it doesn't matter what it is, if it is actual loss or grief or some kind of emotional pain, it can feel like a death no matter what, right? So holding on to the thread is really about practicing on the daily basis that we are being held and supported. And if you're still in a place where you're like, well, I don't believe that there is any kind of magic. I don't believe that there is any kind of whatever God, source, universe. You can play with that. You can play by asking for signs. So the other day, this last week, I had a very strange week. I felt very odd, and I felt like I don't know, it just felt very strange, and I was anticipating something, and then obviously something happened on Saturday on the news, and I was like, oh, yeah, okay, so I was tuning into something. But I was feeling really flat, and I remember just going, okay, give me a sign that magic still exists, and give me a sign that miracles are still possible. I get onto my phone and I open Facebook, and at the top of my feed is a group that's called Something Magic. And I'm like, okay, there you go. There's the sign. It cannot be any more clear than that. You can go, oh, that's a coincidence. No, that's called a synchronicity. That's called you asked for a sign and there's your answer. So there is magic. And then that evening, I was texting with a friend, and they began talking about this story of like a miracle, of how miracles happen. And it's like, it was just so random. And I was literally this morning asking for a sign to show me, is there still magic in my life and around me? And do miracles still exist? And, it's not like a conversation that you have every day with your friend of like, let's talk about miracles, right? So whenever you don't have faith, ask for the signs, ask to be shown, because what this is conversation. And I think the power of prayer, I'm not a religious person. I've never gone to church, but I've always had a form of conversation with the universe or source creator. But I think when we actually pray, what's so powerful about it is because it's intention. It's intention, and it's a conversation that we feel. We're having a conversation, be it with our higher self, our guides, our angels, God, creator, universe. Again, doesn't matter who you're speaking to, but you're in conversation with something that is more than just you, that is also you, right? That is also the essence of who you are, because all of this is consciousness. All of this is love in different form and different shape, right? Different drops from the same ocean that maybe have just gone into their own little, buckets, as I think it was Glennon Doyle that used that analogy. So being in conversation with something that is both beyond us and of us on a greater level, in greater form. And I think keeping that conversation, it's similar to how when I do inner child work with people, that it's about building a relationship with ourselves. It's about building a language with ourselves so that we know how to communicate. How do I feel when I'm scared, when I'm triggered, when I'm lonely, when I feel rejected, when I feel not good enough? What are the things that I need? How do I give myself? All of that is building a relationship and building a conversation with ourselves. And when we can have that, where on a daily basis, we are checking in with ourselves, we're feeling into ourselves as the day goes by, and we have different emotions and different things happen, and we have different thoughts. How are we conversing with ourselves? So as within, so without, as above, so below, right? So being in conversation with all of the various aspects of ourselves, whether it be our inner child or our higher self or the earth or God or a friend or, an ancestor that's passed, right? It almost doesn't matter. It's not that it doesn't matter, but the point is everything includes a conversation with. We have the ability to have conversation with. And I think the moment we do that, we're creating a movement of energy Because I think when we get stuck in a rut, or when we go into a dark hole, or when we go into depression, or when we go into losing of faith, it's like we shrink in on ourselves. Everything kind of concaves and becomes this kind of like black hole. But actually what I'm going to drop in is what's interesting about that is I actually think that when we drop into a black hole, that is just a portal for another kind of dimension to open up. And I will say that that's backed by my experience of every time I've had a dark night of the soul, it's opened up into a much more like a whole new regeneration of illumination, right? It's like a next level kind of ascending to another platform, right, of our growth, of our evolution. Now, I was just listening to a coach that I follow, and he was saying, I've played the victim. I know what it's like to be there. I've played the victim, and you go like, why is this happening to me? And, all of these terrible things, and why is life this bad? Or, I feel abandoned or betrayed by God or the universe, whatever word you use. And he was saying that, what really changed it for him is for looking at it through the eyes of how is this working for me? Like, what is the value in this? What is the meaning in this? What am I, and I know some people don't like this term, but what am I learning? This is the school of life. Now, the problem is that when people are in a good state and they come to me and they do this work, doesn't even to me, not even with me, it can be with any therapist, right? But you feel like you're doing kind of whatever you want to call it, self-development, self-improvement, growth. You kind of feel like, oh, okay, I'm learning these things about myself and I'm building self-awareness and I'm, feeling more in quote unquote control of my state of being or my emotions. I'm understanding myself more. I have more self-acceptance, more self-love. I have a better relationship with myself. Wonderful. And then life hits you with a curveball. And that's when the practice really comes to the test, right? That's when the work really comes in to see like, what are the tools that I have gained from this? Because it's easy to do it and apply the tools when life is going well. Just the same thing as when I say like, it's easy to love yourself when you're happy and feel great and positive and fit and blah, blah, whatever it is. But self-love and self-acceptance is needed when we feel shitty, when we feel bad, when we're having a hard time. That's when it comes into its fullest expression, right? So that's why like faith happens in the dark. The leap of faith happens in the darkness. It happens in the unknown, right? So it's interesting to me that when something all of a sudden life throws you the curveball, it's easy to kind of throw that out the window and go, well, it's bullshit or none of it works. When actually everything that we've been working on, that becomes the moment. Like the spotlight is on you. You're on the stage. This isn't a test because the universe will never test you. But we love to learn and grow when it's convenient for us. Right? We love to learn and grow when it's like, I'm happily doing this inner work. But when you have to trudge through the mud because some shit has got hard in your life, you're like, I don't want to learn. I don't want to have a lesson. And I think also we need to look at what is our definition, what is our connotation. I think why some people don't like the term learning or lesson is because they think it's a punishment, because they went to school or probably like, you're going to learn this lesson, or they had parenting that's like pointing the finger at you, you're going to learn this lesson. You've been a bad boy, a bad girl. You get a bad grade, right? You're not going to pass. And so people are afraid of lessons. Whereas I feel very grateful that I don't have any kind of memories of punishment when I was a child, and I went to a Waldorf school. So yes, you were graded, but it wasn't like a normal school. And so I don't have this connotation that learning is a bad thing. I personally, my personal relationship to learning is I will always want to learn because I want to grow. And I want to grow because I want to evolve, because that's interesting to me. And if I came to this planet as a soul and didn't learn anything and didn't grow and didn't evolve, I'd be like, well, what's the point? This is kind of a bitch of a ride. Why come here and experience this if there isn't any evolution to be had in it? And when I say that, it's not to improve because you're not good enough, but I just do believe that the soul wants to grow. It's curious. I think the universe itself is curious. I think God's source creator itself is curious. It's constantly expanding. It's constantly wanting to experience itself from different angles and different forms. That's why there is no good, bad, right, wrong outside of this realm of duality, right? So I just personally think that growth and learning is beautiful. So my connotation is actually a very positive one. And just, again, this is my personal experience. All of the traumas I've experienced in my life and the stuff that was really hard and painful and wounding, you could say, I am very grateful that I always looked at it from the perspective of, okay, how can I grow through this? How will this make me stronger or wiser or more empathic? It reminds me of when I was in my early 20s and I was doing hypnotherapy work with this woman. And I had this vision of being in child's pose on the floor with shattered glass all around me. And I knew that all those pieces of shattered glass represented all of the hard things I'd experienced in my life up until that point. And I knew that those shards of glass had to be there because if I had experienced those things, it would allow me to have empathy and understanding for other people that have experienced similar things, right? Maybe a different story, but a similar feeling. So we can look at our life and we can choose to be a victim. We can choose to feel like we're being punished by God or something or someone else. We can choose to feel like we're unsupported and unheld and that, all of this is bullshit. We can choose that. But I wonder how we would feel if we chose that. And I'm not meaning to say that you need to go to the opposite extreme and have like blind faith and be like, life is just dandy and rosy and I'm just going to, spiritually bypass everything and say it's great, right? That's not what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is that, you know what? Part of life and part of being human is there's going to be suffering. There are going to be hard times. There's going to be shit that happens in your life that you're like, what the hell? This isn't fair. This isn't right. This hurts. This sucks. I don't like it. I don't want it. That might even like nearly kill you from all the pain and despair and suffering and grief that it brings you. But if you can look at it as something that is a part of your life's journey, even though it seems absolutely crazy and nuts to even think about that in the moment, but if you can really think about this phrase, how is life happening for me and not to me? Then we no longer have to be the victim, because being the victim sucks. It doesn't solve anything. It doesn't make anything even remotely like good or hopeful or like never mind the magic and the synchronicity or feeling held and supported. The victim will always want to be the victim. The victim will always find people and things and ways to point the blame to, even to oneself, right? It can turn towards oneself and towards self-blame and self-hatred. But when we can look at it is that nothing in life is punishing you. There's no test, there's no lesson that's going to berate you. But if we're here and we've signed up to be here because we want to learn, grow, and evolve, then it has to be happening for us. And so none of it is actually bad. It might be hard, it might be challenging, but none of it is actually bad. None of it is actually wrong. And you can look at the world and you go, well, man, there's some really fucked up things going on. How is that working for us? But then we've got to really zoom out, right? So some people say, well, humanity has been in amnesia for a very, very long time. And sometimes it takes things getting really hard and really ugly and really painful to feel again. To feel and to be in the vulnerability of feeling. Come back to your heart. Come back to your humanity, and feel it. Cry, scream, grieve, but feel. And then through the feeling, let it crack your heart open so that you love again and that you love it all. That's what peace is the acceptance of all. And whatever you hate outside of you is probably what you hate inside of you. Whatever you feel disappointed by other people is probably what you feel disappointed by within yourself. However you're judging other people is how you're judging yourself, as within, so without. And again, that doesn't mean, you need to reprimand yourself if you're doing that. It's, let me be aware of that so that I can tend to myself with love. And if you tend to yourself with love, you know what? You're not going to be judgmental to other people. You're not going to blame them. You're not even going to be disappointed in the same way because you're not going to expect the same shit from them because you're going to have empathy. You're going to have understanding that, you know what, they're a human too. They have a heart too, and they feel too. And actually, we're all one, right? So I think when we contemplate these things and we sit with these things and we feel into them, we really feel into them, separation becomes too painful. Hatred becomes too painful. And victimization seems too much of a waste of what is an experience of growth that is just simply an experience. Neither good, bad, right, wrong. You can't fuck up life. You can't fail. We've got to learn to be so much more loving and gentle with ourselves and realize that nobody's grading us, nobody's testing us, and most especially nobody's punishing us. Sometimes life can feel punishing. It can. It can be ruthless and merciless. But again, we get to choose. We do have free will. We do get to have a choice of how am I going to face this? How am I going to show up in this? How am I going to treat myself as I move through this? How am I going to treat other human beings as I move through this? And am I going to let fear win or am I going to let love win? And actually, if there is fear, fear also deserves to be loved. And love is the ultimate alchemist. So just because you have fear or shame or blame or anger or whatever things that you define as bad, if you allow yourself to feel them and hold them in love, you will alchemize them. They're just energy, right? I like this, emotions or energy in motion. It's just energy. Emotions change when we allow them to breathe, when we recognize and we witness them and we hold them when we feel them and we love and embrace them. It actually really is that simple. The practice is challenging because we're not used to it. So I think by having this conversation, by contemplating on these points, we can remember, if you feel into the energy of it, like just me talking about it, I can feel like I'm in the field of it right now. And in the field, it feels like this beautiful, warm, fuzzy energy. I feel like I'm being held by love right now. I feel like I'm being held by some entity and source of just beauty and wonder and magic. And people have a different name for what that is. But I can feel it in my heart right now. I can feel it in my body. I can feel almost like the particles in the air around me. And when you feel that, that is at the very least your thread to the balloon. Or like, I don't know, a freaking, spaceship that is just going to keep you rocketing you up so you'll never drown. I did a podcast probably a year and a half ago about the container of love. What if you were to live your life that the container for it is love and will always be love, and that it can never leave you, abandon you, reject you, drop you. It is always there. It is always there holding you. And if you could remember that, so that even when you go through the hard times and you have a day, even I had some days last week where it was really uncomfortable and I was swimming in the sea and I had tears in my eyes and I was just like, God, this hurts. This hurts. But I breathed in it. And it's for me, the sea is my place of prayer. And, water is amazing, the consciousness of water. And follow Veda Austin and you learn a lot of magic about, the consciousness of water. It's so magical. And even learning about plasma and all of this stuff, it's remarkable. But, I was really just like, wow, being with it, breathing into it, handing it over, like my prayer in the sea. And what gets me through those days is because I know now, I just know it's going to be okay. This too shall pass. I'm not being punished. There's nothing wrong with me or life or anything. Sometimes I think this is very weird. What's the point? Why am I here? What's the meaning of this? But even that too, I know it will shift and change and pass. And I'm learning. It's one thing I've really learned this year, to not go into that, like giving the middle finger to the universe, being like, you've dropped me. Like I had a real miracle several months ago that really showed me, oh, wow, okay, actually, I'm never alone. And I asked for help and it came instantaneously in the most magical of ways. And I was like, okay, I'm a believer now. I'm a believer now, right? I've had the lived experience of it. Miracles do happen. And apparently they happen all the time if you pay attention. And if you believe, seeing is believing. We see what we believe. If you don't believe it, you're not going to see it. And so, yes, then maybe life looks very dim and dark. We see what we believe. Things become apparent as we believe and embody them. And even now, if you want to go into frequency, that, there's a lot of things that they're saying as we raise frequency, as the planet raises frequency, as humanity raises frequency, we're going to begin to see things that we could not see before because we were not in the same frequency. Again, it reminds me of the pitchfork experiment that I mentioned a couple episodes again. You can go on YouTube and look at what the pitchfork experiment is between having same like hertz, right? That if the frequency is the same, there's a pathway, a conversation, right? And if not, there's no harmony. Just look it up on YouTube. I don't want to go into the story again, but it's really remarkable. So it's kind of like the proof is there if we want to see it. And when I say proof, people really love science. And so they want things backed up. And there's enough science, but proof is in your experience. Proof is in the pudding, as they say, right? But yeah, we get to choose, how do we want to perceive things? What do we want to believe in? And if those days are hard and you're like, I believe in nothing, can you even surrender to that? Can that be okay? Can you hold that with love? Because normally I find if you can accept anything and everything, it will shift and it will evolve and it will flow into something else. And so I had one day last week where I felt this just like, ugh, yuck. The whole day just felt yucky, felt painful. And then I think because I had just sat with it all day, something, I don't even remember, it was the end of the day, it was sunset, and I just started to look at the color of the sky and the silky air, and I was looking at, people just around me. I was just taking things in observation, and all of a sudden my energy completely shifted. And you know what it was? It was because I was feeling gratitude. I was just feeling grateful for beauty. And so I remind myself like, wow, I feel grateful that I can feel. I feel grateful that I can be with things so that they will naturally, in their own time, evolve and alchemize into something else, right? Or at the very least, I'm just moving through something. Who knows if it was even mine or if it was collective? Who knows? But we've got to start framing life as something that we move through rather than things happening to us that block us, that punish us, that reprimand us, right? And then we fall into the victim. We're moving through this experience. It is in constant motion, even when we feel stuck, even when we're in the plateau. There's still movement if we're engaged with it, if we're having the conversation with it. Right? Keep conversing with yourself, with your higher self, with Creator. Keep feeling. And I think now more than ever, we're recognizing that if we go too far into fear, if we go too far into judgment and anger and blame, it's going to hurt us. It's going to really start to hurt us. And so as you go into those things, you got to check yourself and go, okay, whoa, what path am I going to choose here? Path of fear, path of love? And if you feel afraid, as I said, I'm going to say it again, it's okay. Love that too. That is the path of love. So I think the more we practice this, the easier it is to move through hard times, through times where we can't see. We will hold on to have some kind of faith, because we will know it's okay to walk through the dark. It's okay to grieve even. It's okay to, have feelings that hurt. You're going to get through it. You're not alone. You're held. It's going to be okay. And what makes it the most okay is if you can be there for yourself with love. That is the most comforting thing. And then, of course, it's lovely to receive that outside of you. But we can't expect other people to fill in the holes that we have within ourselves. Because if we don't fill in those holes with love for ourselves, then if they disappoint us, we're going to blame them for our lack of feeling whole or happy or, excuse me, or at peace or safe or, whatever it is. But actually, it's an inside-out job, right? So the invitation today is to start creating a practice with yourself where all the things that you recognize you judge or you feel like you need to separate or exile or divide, or wherever that edge of vulnerability is where you're like, I don't like this, I don't want to feel it. The invitation is for you to sit with it. Your invitation is for you to love that too. Your invitation is to recognize, why do I have judgment over this state of being? Why do I have this expectation? Why do I have this disappointment? Learn to include everything, and you will learn to love everything. And that is where peace lies. And once we feel that peace, I think that's what leads us to the faith that we're always held in that container of love, no matter what, no matter what. And this is a crazy, wacky realm to come to. Like, welcome to Earth, my friends. It is the school of life, and it's going to rock your boat. Like, it just is. But we chose to come here, right? So then we've got to trust, how is life happening for me, not to me? We've got to trust ourselves. We've got to trust our higher self, our soul, our oversoul, God, creator, source. Because without it, we're going to spiral down. And that's okay too. And I believe that there will always be even a sliver of light that will pull you up and out. Because no matter if you believe in it or not, it is always there and around you. All right, I'm going to leave it at that. As always, take it or leave it as feels right for you, and loving you from afar. You've been listening to Raw Conversations with Corinne Bloom. Thanks so much for showing up, listening in, and being a part of the conversation with me.